The red warning light blinked steadily in the darkness of the Kepler Observatory. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the screen again. She had been watching the deep space monitors for 6 hours straight, and her shift would not end for another 2 hours. The observatory floated in the cold emptiness between stars, far from Earth and the other human colonies. It was one of 12 stations that watched the darkness beyond human space. Most days, nothing happened. Sarah and her small crew of 8 people spent their time checking equipment, sending reports back to Earth, and trying not to go crazy from the loneliness. Sarah had volunteered for this job 3 years ago. She wanted to be the first human to detect alien life. Every day, she hoped to see something new on her screens, something that would prove humans were not alone in the universe. But day after day, there was only silence. The warning light blinked faster. Sarah sat up straight and checked her instruments. The quantum frequency detector was picking up something strange. She had never seen readings like this before. The signal was coming from a direction where no human ships should be. "Martinez, come look at this," Sarah called to her communications. Officer Sergeant Luis Martinez floated over to her station. In the low gravity of the observatory, everyone moved by pushing off walls and handholds. He looked at Sarah's screen and frowned. "That's not right," he said. "The signal is using quantum frequencies we don't even know how to make." Sarah felt her heart beat faster. This was it. This was what she had been waiting for. "Can you decode it?" Martinez pulled himself to his own station and started working. His fingers moved quickly over the controls. "It's going to take time. The signal is very complex. But Sarah, there's something else. This signal is incredibly powerful. Whoever sent this had technology far beyond anything we have." Dr. Emily Watson, the station's science officer, joined them. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been studying space signals for 20 years. "What do we have?" Sarah showed her the readings. Dr. Watson studied them carefully. Her face grew serious. "This is not a natural signal. This was made by intelligent beings, and they're using methods we thought were impossible." The 3 of them worked for the next hour. Slowly, the signal began to make sense. It was not random noise or natural space phenomena. It was a message, a very long, very detailed message. "I think I've got something," Martinez said. His voice was excited but also worried. "It's a distress call, but not like any distress call I've ever seen. This message contains massive amounts of data, pictures, sounds, mathematical formulas, star charts. It's like someone is trying to tell us everything about themselves all at once." Dr. Watson looked at the decoded data streaming across the screens. "They're calling themselves the Zalani Collective, from what I can understand. They're a peaceful trading civilization. They have colonies on dozens of worlds." Sarah felt cold, despite the warmth of the station. "Why are they sending a distress call?" More data came through. Pictures appeared on their screens. Beautiful cities made of crystal and light. Strange but graceful beings with 4 arms and large, intelligent eyes. Ships that looked like flowing works of art rather than machines. Then the images changed. The crystal cities were broken and burning. The graceful ships were torn apart and floating dead in space. The Zalani people were running, hiding, dying. "Something is hunting them," Dr. Watson whispered. "Something that destroys everything it finds." The message continued. Martinez translated as fast as he could. "They call their enemy the Harvesters, ancient machines that travel from star to star. They don't just destroy civilizations, they consume them completely. They take everything, the people, the knowledge, the culture, and add it to themselves." New images appeared. Massive geometric shapes that looked like they were made of black, metal, and strange energy. These shapes surrounded planets and began tearing them apart piece by piece. Nothing the Zalani did could stop them. "How long has this been going on?" Sarah asked. Martinez checked the timestamps in the message. This distress call was sent 3 months ago, but according to their data, the harvesters have been attacking Zilani worlds for over a year. Sarah felt sick. While humans had been living their normal lives, an entire civilization had been screaming for help, and no one had answered. Dr. Watson was reading through more of the translated data. This message wasn't just sent to us. They broadcast it to every corner of the galaxy. They sent it to anyone who might be listening. Have they gotten any responses? Sarah asked. Watson shook her head sadly. No, nothing. They're completely alone. The three humans sat in silence for a moment. They were looking at the death of an entire civilization. Billions of intelligent beings were being destroyed, and there was nothing anyone could do to help them. Then Sarah noticed something in the data. Martinez, look at this part again. What does this section mean? Martinez studied the information. It's a warning. They're saying that the harvesters don't stop. Once they finish with one civilization, they move on to the next. They've been doing this for thousands of years. Dr. Watson's face went pale. How many civilizations have they destroyed? The answer came in the next part of the message. Star. Charts showed the paths the harvesters had taken across the galaxy. Dozens of star systems were marked with symbols that could only mean one thing: extinct. At least 30 civilizations, Martinez said quietly. Maybe more. Some of these records go back 10,000 years. Sarah looked at the star charts more carefully. She felt her blood turn to ice. Where are they heading next? Dr. Watson worked at her station, comparing the harvester movement patterns with human star charts. After a few minutes, she looked up with fear in her eyes. If they continue on their current path, she said slowly, they'll reach human space in approximately 50 years. The weight of that information settled on the three humans. This was not just about helping strangers. This was about the survival of humanity itself. Sarah made a decision. We need to send this to Earth immediately. Full priority transmission. Sarah, Martinez said carefully, Earth is 8 light hours away. Even with our fastest quantum communications, it will take time for them to receive and decode everything. Then we better start now, Sarah replied. She began preparing the transmission package. Every piece of data the Zilani had sent, every image, every warning, every plea for help. Dr. Watson was still studying the Zilani technology data. Sarah, there's something else. The Zilani are far more advanced than we are. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. If they can't fight the harvesters, what chance do we have? Sarah stopped working and looked at her colleagues. These were good people, smart people. They understood what this message meant. Humanity was facing a threat that had destroyed dozens of civilizations more advanced than their own. But Sarah also understood something else. For the first time in human history, they had proof that other intelligent life existed, and that life was crying out for help. Maybe we can't fight them, Sarah said. Maybe we'll all die trying, but we can't. Just ignore this. Someone answered our radio signals when we first started broadcasting. Someone has to answer theirs. Martinez nodded slowly. You're right. Even if it's hopeless, we have to try. Dr. Watson was already helping to prepare the transmission. The Zilani have been alone for months, thinking the entire galaxy has abandoned them. At least we can let them know someone heard their call. The three humans worked through the rest of their shift and into the next. They packaged every bit of information, added their own analysis, and prepared detailed recommendations for Earth Command. As Sarah finally sent the transmission toward Earth, she thought about the Zilani people. They were dying in the darkness, between stars, believing they were completely alone. But they were wrong. Humanity had heard their call. Now the question was, what would humanity do about it? The signal raced through space toward Earth, carrying with it the hopes and fears of two civilizations. In 8 hours, the leaders of humanity would have to make a choice that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Sarah looked out the observatory's main window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the harvesters were destroying another world. Somewhere else, The last Zalani were hiding and hoping for a miracle. She didn't know if humanity could provide that miracle, but she knew they had to try. The red warning light had stopped blinking. The message was sent. Now all they could do was wait and hope that humanity would prove worthy of the trust the Zalani had placed in them by sending their desperate call to the stars. The emergency meeting room in Geneva was packed with the most important people in human government. President Catherine Walsh sat at the head of the long table, her face serious as she listened to the reports. Around her sat military leaders, scientists, and representatives from all the major human colonies. Admiral Marcus Torres stood at the front of the room, pointing to a large display screen. The screen showed the star charts that the Kepler Observatory had received from the Zalani. Red marks indicated dead civilizations. A moving yellow dot showed the estimated position of the Harvester fleet. "The situation is clear," Admiral Torres said in his deep voice. "We are facing an enemy that has destroyed over 30 advanced civilizations. Their technology is far beyond anything we possess. They have been active for thousands of years, and they show no signs of stopping." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the head of Xenological Studies, raised her hand. "Admiral Torres, with respect, I think you're missing the most important part of this message." Torres frowned. He was a military man who believed in facts and force. Dr. Vasquez was a scientist who studied alien cultures, and he didn't always trust her opinions. "Please explain, Doctor," President Walsh said. Dr. Vasquez stood and activated her own display. New images appeared on the screen. These showed harvester machines in action, tearing apart planets and consuming everything they found. "The harvesters don't just destroy civilizations," she explained. "They absorb them. Every piece of technology, every bit of knowledge, every cultural achievement, it all becomes part of the harvester collective. That's why they're called harvesters. They harvest entire civilizations." General Patricia Hayes, the head of Colonial Defense, leaned forward. "What does that mean for us?" "It means they're getting stronger with every civilization they destroy," Dr. Vasquez replied. "The harvesters that attack humanity in 50 years will be more powerful than the ones attacking the Zalani now. They will have absorbed 31 civilizations instead of 30. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Waiting would not make the problem easier. It would make it worse. Admiral Torres shook his head. "Doctor, even if that's true, what can we do? We have 12 colonies and maybe 200 warships. The Zalani had hundreds of worlds and thousands of ships, and they're losing." "We could run," suggested Governor Mills from the Mars colony. "We could take our best ships and fastest transports and head in the opposite direction. Find empty space, where the harvesters will never look for us." "For how long?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "The harvesters have been doing this for thousands of years. They'll eventually reach every corner of the galaxy. Running just delays the inevitable." President Walsh had been quiet during the debate. She was a woman who had led humanity through 3 major crises in her 8 years as president. She understood the weight of the decision she had to make. "Dr. Vasquez," the president said, "you've studied the Zalani message more than anyone. What do you think we should do?" Dr. Vasquez looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. These people held the fate of the human race in their hands. "I think we should answer their call," she said simply. Admiral Torres stood up, quickly. "Madam President, that would be suicide. We cannot fight an enemy that has destroyed 30 civilizations." "I'm not talking about fighting them," Dr. Vasquez replied. "I'm talking about answering their call. The Zalani sent their message to the entire galaxy. Do you know how many civilizations responded? 0. No one answered. No one even tried to help. She activated another display showing the technical specifications of harvester machines. But look at this data carefully. The harvesters follow patterns. They attack the same way every time. They use the same strategies against every civilization." General Hayes studied the information. "You're right. Their tactics don't change much between targets. Exactly, Dr. Vasquez said. They've been so successful for so long that they've become predictable. Every civilization they've faced has tried to fight them the same way, with bigger ships and more powerful weapons, and every civilization has failed. What are you suggesting? President Walsh asked. I'm suggesting that humanity try something different. We don't have the biggest ships or the most powerful weapons, but we have something else. We have the ability to think differently. Admiral Torres crossed his arms. Doctor, with all due respect, positive thinking isn't going to stop planet-killing machines. Dr. Vasquez smiled slightly. No, Admiral, but unconventional thinking might. She brought up new data on the screen. The Zilani message contains detailed battle reports from their encounters with the Harvesters. Every civilization tried the same basic strategy. Meet force with force, build bigger weapons, create stronger shields, fight in large fleet formations. What's wrong with that? General Hayes asked. Nothing, if you're fighting a conventional enemy, Dr. Vasquez replied. But the Harvesters aren't conventional. They're machines. They calculate optimal responses based on previous encounters. If every civilization attacks them the same way, they can optimize their defenses perfectly. President Walsh leaned forward. You're saying we need to fight them differently. I'm saying we need to fight them in ways they haven't seen before, ways they can't predict or calculate. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Admiral Torres spoke up. Even if that's true, Doctor, we still have the basic problem. We don't have enough ships or people to mount any kind of effective response. The journey to Zilani space alone would take months. Which brings us back to the real question, President Walsh said. Should we try to help the Zilani, knowing we'll probably fail? Governor Chen from the Europa colony raised her hand. Madam, President, I have to ask, why is this our responsibility? We didn't know these aliens existed until yesterday. Why should we risk human lives for strangers? It was a fair question. Everyone in the room understood it. Humanity had its own problems. Resources were limited. Every ship sent to help the Zilani was a ship that couldn't defend human colonies. Dr. Vasquez looked around the room again. Governor, Chen, you're absolutely right. We don't owe the Zilani anything. But this isn't really about them. What do you mean? President Walsh asked. If we do nothing, the Harvesters will finish destroying the Zilani in a few months. Then they'll move on to the next civilization, and eventually they'll reach us. When that happens, we'll send out our own distress call to the galaxy. Dr. Vasquez paused to let that sink in. What kind of response do we want to receive? Do we want the galaxy to ignore us the way they've ignored the Zilani? Or do we want to live in a galaxy where civilizations help each other? Admiral Torres shook his head. Doctor, you're being idealistic. The universe is a harsh place. Survival comes first. Does it, Admiral? Dr. Vasquez asked. Because from what I can see, the strategy of every civilization hiding and looking out only for themselves has resulted in 30 dead civilizations. Maybe it's time to try something different. President Walsh stood up. The room fell silent. When the president of the United Earth Alliance stood, everyone listened. 3 days ago, we were alone in the universe, she said. Today we know we're part of a galaxy full of intelligent life. We also know that galaxy is in terrible danger. She walked to the large window that looked out over the city of Geneva. Millions of people lived their normal lives down there, not knowing that the fate of their species was being decided in this room. Admiral Torres is right, the president continued. We don't have the ships or people to mount a conventional military response. Governor Chen is right, too. We don't owe these aliens anything. She turned back to face the room. But Dr. Vasquez is also right. This is bigger than just helping strangers. This is about what kind of galaxy we want to live in, and what kind of species we want to be. President Walsh walked back to her chair but didn't sit down. I've made my decision. We will answer the Zilani distress call. Admiral Torres opened his mouth to object, but the president held up her hand. I'm not ordering a full military response. she said. "We can't afford that, and it would probably fail anyway, but we will send a task force. Our best ships, our best people, and our best ideas." She looked around the room at each person. "We may not be able to save the Zalani. We may not even be able to save ourselves. But when the history of this galaxy is written, it will say that when humanity heard a cry for help," we answered. The room was silent for a long moment. Then General Hayes spoke up. "Madam President, what kind of task force are you talking about?" "I want recommendations from all of you within 24 hours, President Walsh replied. "But I'm thinking about our most advanced experimental ships, the ones with new technologies the harvesters have never seen." Admiral Torres nodded slowly. Despite his objections, he was a military man who followed orders. "The Defiance is our most advanced warship. She has new stealth systems and weapons that we've never tested in combat." "Perfect," the President said. "I want Captain James Mitchell to lead this mission. He's our best tactical officer, and he's not afraid to try new ideas." Dr. Vasquez raised her hand. "Madam President, I'd like to volunteer for this mission. If we're going to communicate with the Zalani, we'll need someone who understands their culture and language." "Granted," President Walsh said. "Anyone else?" Several other hands went up around the room. Scientists, military officers, and technical specialists all volunteered for what everyone knew might be a suicide mission. President Walsh felt a surge of pride. This was humanity at its best. When faced with impossible odds, they didn't run or hide. They stood up and fought back. "Very well," she said. "We have 3 months to prepare while the task force travels to Zalani space. Use that time wisely. Develop new weapons, new tactics, new ideas. We're going to show the galaxy something it's never seen before." She looked around the room one last time. "We're going to show them what humans do when someone needs help." As the meeting ended and people began to leave, Dr. Vasquez approached the President. "Madam President," she said quietly, "you know, this might not work." President Walsh nodded. "I know, Doctor, but sometimes doing the right thing is more important than doing the safe thing." She looked out the window again at the city below. "Besides, I have a feeling we're going to surprise everyone, including ourselves." 3 hours later, Captain James Mitchell received the order that would change his life forever. He was to take the experimental warship Defiance and lead task, force Prometheus to the other side of the galaxy. His mission: answer a distress call and save a dying civilization. As he read the orders, Captain Mitchell smiled grimly. It was an impossible mission with almost no chance of success. In other words, it was exactly the kind of challenge humanity was meant for. Captain James Mitchell stood on the bridge of the UCS Defiance, looking at the destruction before him. After 3 months of travel across the galaxy, Task Force Prometheus had finally reached Zalani space. What they found was worse than anything in the distress call messages. The crystal cities that had been so beautiful in the Zalani transmissions were now broken shells floating in space. Entire planets had been stripped down to their rocky cores. The graceful Zalani ships that once carried trade and culture between the stars were now twisted pieces of metal drifting in the void. "My God," whispered Dr. Elena Vasquez from her station behind the captain's chair. "How could anyone do this?" Mitchell's jaw was tight with anger. He had seen war before, but this was different. This wasn't conquest or even destruction. This was consumption. The harvesters hadn't just destroyed the Zalani civilization. They had eaten it. Commander Sarah Roberts, his first officer, was studying the tactical displays. "Captain, we're detecting active harvester constructs in the third planet's orbit. They appear to be in the final stages of planetary processing." "How many constructs?" Mitchell asked. 12 large geometric shapes. Each one is approximately 5 kilometers long and 3 kilometers wide. They're using some kind of energy beam to break down the planet's crust and absorb the material." Mitchell had studied the harvester data during the long journey to Zelani, space. He knew that each of those constructs was more powerful than his entire task force, but he also knew something the harvesters didn't expect. Humans were here to help. "Any signs of Zelani survivors?" he asked. Lieutenant Park at the communications station looked up hopefully. "Sir, I'm detecting weak transmissions from the fourth planet's moon. The signals match Zelani communication protocols." Mitchell felt a spark of hope. Maybe they weren't too late after all. "Set course for the fourth planet," he ordered, "and send a message on Zelani frequencies. Tell them that humans have come to answer their distress call." The crew of the Defiance worked quickly to prepare the message. Dr. Vasquez had spent the entire journey learning the Zelani language and culture. She crafted a response that would let the survivors know that help had finally arrived. As they approached the fourth planet's moon, the reply came faster than anyone expected. The Zelani survivors had been monitoring all frequencies, desperately hoping for any sign that their call for help had been heard. "Captain," Lieutenant Park said, with excitement, "they're responding. They want to establish communication with our leadership immediately." "Put them through," Mitchell ordered. The main screen flickered, and then showed the image of a being unlike anything the humans had ever seen. The Zelani called Counselor Thren had 4 graceful arms, large, intelligent eyes, and skin that seemed to shimmer with its own light. Despite the alien appearance, the emotion on Thren's face was unmistakably human. Desperate hope mixed with disbelief. You actually came," Thren said in heavily accented but understandable English. We were certain that no one had heard our call." Captain Mitchell stepped forward. "Counselor Thren, I am Captain James Mitchell of the human ship Defiance. We received your distress call 3 months ago. We came as quickly as we could." Thren's large eyes showed confusion. "Humans? We have no record of your species in our databases. Where do you come from?" Dr. Vasquez joined the conversation. "We come from a small region of space about 3 months' travel from here. We're a young civilization, but we couldn't ignore your call for help." "Young civilization?" Thren repeated. "How many worlds do you control? How many ships did you bring?" Mitchell exchanged glances with Dr. Vasquez. This was the moment when the Zelani would realize just how hopeless the situation really was. "We control 12 worlds," Mitchell said honestly, "and we brought 12 ships." The silence that followed was painful. Thren's expression went from hope to confusion to something that might have been pity. "Captain Mitchell," Thren said gently, "we appreciate your courage in coming here, but you don't understand what you're facing. The harvesters have destroyed hundreds of our worlds. We had thousands of ships, each more advanced than anything I see in your small fleet. And we're losing." Commander Roberts stepped forward. "Counselor, how many Zelani are left?" Thren's shoulders sagged. "Perhaps 50,000 scattered across a dozen hidden refugees. We were once a civilization of 40 billion souls spread across 200 worlds." The weight of that number hit the human crew like a physical blow. An entire civilization of 40 billion people had been reduced to 50,000 refugees hiding in the darkness. "What happened to everyone else?" Dr. Vasquez asked quietly. "The harvesters don't just kill," Thren explained. "They absorb. Every Zelani they capture becomes part of their collective consciousness. Our people, our knowledge, our culture. It all becomes part of them. In a way, the harvesters are now more Zelani than we are." Mitchell felt sick, but also angry. The harvesters weren't just destroyers. They were thieves who stole entire civilizations and used their victims' own knowledge against them. "Counselor," Mitchell said, "we need to understand how the harvesters operate. Can you share your battle records with us?" Thren looked puzzled. "Captain, surely you cannot be thinking of fighting them." Even if you had 1,000 times more ships, you could not defeat the harvesters. They have absorbed the knowledge of 30 civilizations. They know every possible tactic and strategy. Maybe, Mitchell replied, but they don't know human tactics and strategies. Dr. Vasquez was already working at her station, establishing data links with the Zilani systems. Counselor Thren, we'd like to review all of your encounters with the harvesters. Every battle, every tactic you tried, every result. Why? Thren asked. What could you possibly learn that we haven't already discovered? Mitchell smiled grimly. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to see solutions that you can't see from the inside. Over the next several hours, the Defiance received massive amounts of data from the Zilani archives. Battle records, technical specifications, tactical analyses. Everything the Zilani had learned about their enemy over months of desperate fighting. What the humans discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. Dr. Vasquez was the first to notice the pattern. Captain, look at this. Every civilization the harvesters have faced has used the same basic approach to warfare. She brought up tactical displays showing dozens of battles across thousands of years. Large fleet formations, heavy, weapons, direct assault tactics. Everyone tries to meet force with force. Commander Roberts studied the data. And it never works. No, Dr. Vasquez agreed. But look at this. The harvesters' response to these tactics is also always the same. They analyze the enemy's approach, calculate the optimal counter-strategy, and then deploy overwhelming force. Lieutenant Park looked up from his station. It's like they're playing the same game over and over again, and they always win because they know all the rules. Mitchell nodded slowly. So what happens if we change the rules? Thren had been listening to the human conversation with growing amazement. Captain, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that every civilization you've mentioned has tried to beat the harvesters at their own game, Mitchell replied. What if we play a different game entirely? Dr. Vasquez was already pulling up more data. Look at this, Captain. The harvesters always attack in the same patterns. They establish orbital control, deploy constructs to begin planetary processing, and eliminate any resistance using calculated force. What if we don't give them anything to calculate? Commander Roberts suggested. Mitchell felt excitement building. This was what humans were good at, finding new solutions to old problems. Counselor Thren, he said, we need to see a harvester operation in progress. Can you take us to where they're currently active? Thren's eyes widened in alarm. Captain, that would be extremely dangerous. The harvesters have complete control of that system. Perfect, Mitchell replied. That means they won't be expecting visitors. Dr. Vasquez looked concerned. Captain, we don't even know if our weapons can damage harvester constructs. Then we'll find out, Mitchell said. But more importantly, we'll see how they react to something they've never encountered before. Humans. Thren was still confused. Captain Mitchell, I don't understand. How can 12 ships accomplish what thousands could not? Mitchell looked at the alien leader with determination. Counselor, your people have been fighting the harvesters for months using everything you know about warfare. You've tried every conventional tactic and strategy. He gestured to his crew. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years using tactics the harvesters have never seen. We've developed ways of warfare that no other civilization has ever imagined. What kind of ways? Thren asked. Commander Roberts smiled. Guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run tactics, psychological operations, asymmetric warfare. We specialize in fighting enemies that are bigger and stronger than we are, Dr. Vasquez added. Mitchell looked back at Thren. Counselor, the harvesters may have absorbed 30 civilizations, but they've never absorbed humans. They don't know how we think or how we fight. You're going to attack them, Thren said. It wasn't a question. We're going to do something they won't expect, Mitchell corrected. We're going to learn. Thren was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a decision that would change everything. Captain Mitchell, he said formally, The Zilani Collective hereby requests human assistance in our fight against the Harvesters. We offer all of our remaining resources and knowledge in support of your efforts. Mitchell nodded. Accepted, Counselor. But I want you to understand something. We're not here just to help you fight the Harvesters. What do you mean? We're here to learn how to beat them, Mitchell said. Because in 50 years, they're going to reach human space. And when they do, we're going to be ready. Thren looked at the small human force on his screen. 12 ships against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations with thousands of ships. It should have been hopeless. But for the first time in months, Thren felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. Maybe these strange humans with their unusual ideas could accomplish what no one else had managed. Maybe they could find a way to stop the unstoppable. Captain, Thren said, where do we begin? Mitchell smiled. We begin by doing something no one has ever done before. We're going to make the Harvesters react instead of act. As the human task force prepared for their first encounter with the Harvesters, none of them knew that they were about to change the fate of the entire galaxy. The first attack came at dawn on the third day. Captain Mitchell had positioned his task force in the asteroid belt around Zilon Prime, using the broken remains of Zilani mining stations as cover. The Harvesters had been systematically processing the planet for weeks, their massive geometric constructs working with mechanical precision to strip away every useful material. Remember, Mitchell spoke quietly into his comm system, we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to learn from them. The human ships moved like ghosts between the asteroids. The Defiance's new stealth systems made them nearly invisible to conventional sensors. The Harvesters had never encountered stealth technology quite like humanity's. Commander Roberts watched the tactical display as they approached their target. Captain, the nearest Harvester construct is 2 kilometers ahead. It's focused on breaking down a titanium-rich asteroid. Perfect, Mitchell said. Dr. Vasquez, are you recording everything? Every scan, every energy reading, every movement pattern, she confirmed from her science station. The Harvester construct was like nothing the humans had ever seen. It was a massive black shape that seemed to bend light around its edges. Energy. Beams lanced out from its surface, breaking apart rock and metal at the molecular level. The processed materials flowed into the construct like water being absorbed by a sponge. It's beautiful in a horrible way, whispered Lieutenant Park. Mitchell studied the construct's movement patterns. Notice how it processes material. There's a rhythm to it, a sequence. Commander Roberts nodded. It's following a program. Very efficient, but completely predictable. That's our advantage, Mitchell said. It can't adapt to something it doesn't expect. He activated the ship's weapon systems. The Defiance's new plasma cannons were humanity's latest military technology. They had never been tested against Harvester armor. Target the construct's energy projection array, Mitchell ordered. Short burst, then immediate evasive maneuvers. The plasma bolt lanced across space and struck the Harvester construct exactly where Mitchell had aimed. The beam cut a glowing line across the construct's surface, but didn't seem to cause significant damage. What happened next was more interesting than the damage. The construct stopped its work immediately. Energy patterns across its surface shifted. As it began scanning for the source of the attack, its movements became faster, more aggressive. It's looking for us, Roberts reported. But it's scanning in all the wrong places. The Harvester was using standard search patterns based on conventional attack vectors. It was looking for large ships attacking from predictable positions. It wasn't designed to find small, stealthed vessels hiding in asteroids. Phase 2, Mitchell announced. All ships, random harassment fire. Don't try to destroy anything, just annoy them. The next hour was like nothing anyone had ever seen. 12 human ships darted between asteroids, taking quick shots at Harvester constructs and then disappearing before the massive machines could respond. The Harvesters grew increasingly agitated, their search patterns becoming more erratic. Captain, Dr. Vasquez called out excitedly. Look at their energy signatures. They're fluctuating. The constructs are communicating with each other more frequently. They're getting frustrated, Mitchell realized. They can't predict our next move because we don't have a standard pattern. Counselor Thren's voice came over, the comm from the refugee base. Captain Mitchell, this is incredible. In all our months of fighting, we never made the harvesters change their behavior patterns. That's because you were fighting them like civilized beings, Commander Roberts replied. We're fighting them like humans. The harassment continued for another hour. The humans learned valuable information about harvester response times, weapon, ranges, and communication protocols. More importantly, they learned that the ancient machines could be confused. But then everything changed. Captain, Lieutenant Park said urgently, massive energy signature approaching. Something big is coming. The main harvester fleet had arrived. Where there had been 12 constructs before, now there were hundreds. Massive ships that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built descended toward the planet. At their center was something that made everyone on the human ships fall silent. It was a construct so large it could have been mistaken for a small moon. Its surface writhed with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. This was clearly the command ship, the brain that controlled all the other harvester units. All ships, withdraw to safe distance, Mitchell ordered. But he continued to watch the massive construct with fascination rather than fear. Dr. Vasquez was frantically recording data. Captain, that thing is generating energy readings I can barely measure. It's not just a ship, it's some kind of processing center. Processing what? Roberts asked. The answer came from Counselor Thren. Captain, that is what we call a nexus construct. It processes the consciousness of absorbed civilizations. Everything the harvesters learn gets integrated through that machine. Mitchell felt a chill run down his spine. You mean it contains the minds of everyone they've captured? Billions of souls, Thren confirmed sadly. All the knowledge, culture, and consciousness of 30 civilizations is stored in that construct. Doctor, Vasquez looked up from her instruments with a strange expression. Captain, I'm detecting something unusual. The Nexus is broadcasting. Broadcasting what? Music? Art? Literature? It's transmitting cultural data from the absorbed civilizations on multiple frequencies. Mitchell frowned. Why would it do that? Dr. Vasquez worked at her console for several minutes, analyzing the transmissions. When she looked up, her face was pale. Captain, I think the Nexus isn't just storing the consciousness of absorbed civilizations. I think it's trying to preserve them, to keep them alive in the only way it can. The implications of that discovery hit everyone at once. The harvesters weren't just destroyers. They were collectors. They absorbed civilizations because they believed that was the only way to preserve them. It's still wrong, Mitchell said firmly. Preserving consciousness by destroying the beings it came from isn't preservation, it's theft. Commander Roberts was studying tactical readouts of the Nexus construct. Captain, if Dr. Vasquez is right, then that construct contains the knowledge of 30 civilizations, including military knowledge. Mitchell nodded grimly. Which means it knows every tactic and strategy that's ever been used against the harvesters. Every tactic except ours, Roberts added. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her analysis. Captain, I have an idea, but it's incredibly dangerous. All of our ideas are dangerous, Mitchell replied. What do you have in mind? What if we don't try to destroy the Nexus, she suggested. What if we try to communicate with it? Lieutenant Park looked shocked. Communicate with the thing that destroyed 30 civilizations? Think about it, Dr. Vasquez explained. The Nexus contains the consciousness of billions of beings. What if some part of them is still alive in there? What if we could reach them? Mitchell considered the idea. It was insane, but it was also exactly the kind of unconventional thinking that might work. What would we communicate? He asked. Dr. Vasquez was already working on her console. Human culture, human art, music, literature, and philosophy. Things the harvesters have never encountered before. You want to confuse them with poetry? Roberts asked skeptically. I want to show them something they can't categorize or understand, Dr. Vasquez replied. Every civilization they've absorbed has been logical, organized, predictable. Humans are chaotic, contradictory, and creative in ways that don't follow logical patterns. Mitchell made his decision. Do it. Broadcast everything you have about human culture. Music, art, stories, philosophy, everything that makes us human. Captain? Thren's voice came over the comm. What are you doing? Something no one has ever tried before, Mitchell replied. We're going to give the harvesters a gift they can't process. Dr. Vasquez began the transmission. Every piece of human cultural data in the ship's computer was broadcast toward the Nexus construct. Music from every era and culture. Art from cave paintings to digital sculptures. Literature from ancient myths to modern science fiction. Philosophy that ranged from profound wisdom to absurd comedy. At first, nothing happened. The Nexus continued its work, processing planetary material with mechanical efficiency. Then the patterns began to change. Captain, Dr. Vasquez said with excitement, the Nexus is trying to analyze our transmission, but look at its processing patterns. The energy flows across the massive construct were fluctuating wildly. Instead of the steady, predictable patterns they had shown before, the lights were flashing in chaotic sequences. It can't categorize human culture, Roberts realized. Our art and music don't follow logical patterns. It's more than that, Dr. Vasquez said. Human culture is full of contradictions. We create beauty about ugly things. We make art about destruction and loss. We tell stories that don't have clear meanings. The Nexus construct was now pulsing with increasingly erratic energy patterns. The other harvester ships around it began to slow their operations. The Nexus is trying to process and integrate human culture into its database, Dr. Vasquez explained. But human culture doesn't fit into neat categories. Every time it thinks it understands something, it encounters a contradiction. Mitchell watched the massive construct writhing with chaotic energy patterns. What happens if it can't process the data? I don't know, Dr. Vasquez admitted. No one has ever tried this before. They didn't have to wait long to find out. The Nexus construct suddenly stopped all activity. The energy patterns across its surface froze in place. For a moment, there was complete silence across the entire system. Then every harvester construct began broadcasting the same signal simultaneously. It was music, human music. But it was being played by billions of voices at once. The voices of every consciousness the harvesters had absorbed. My God, Thren whispered over the comm. They're singing. The music grew louder and more complex. The absorbed consciousnesses were adding their own cultural elements to the human songs, creating something entirely new. But the Nexus construct couldn't handle the complexity. Its processing systems were overloading, trying to categorize and control something that refused to be controlled. Captain, Dr. Vasquez said urgently, the Nexus is experiencing cascade failures. The human cultural data is creating feedback loops in its consciousness processing systems. Mitchell realized what was happening. The absorbed minds are using our cultural data to assert their own independence. They're breaking free of harvester control. The massive Nexus construct began to convulse. Energy discharges lanced out in all directions as its systems struggled to maintain control over billions of rebellious consciousnesses. All ships, move to safe distance, Mitchell ordered. I think this is going to be big. The explosion, when it came, was visible from 3 star systems away. The Nexus construct tore itself apart as the consciousness of 30 civilizations used human cultural chaos to break free from their digital prison. The shockwave destroyed dozens of smaller harvester constructs and sent the survivors fleeing in panic. When the energy cleared, the harvester fleet was gone, but something new filled the space where the Nexus had been. Thousands of energy patterns that looked almost like ghosts dance through space. The freed consciousnesses of the absorbed civilizations, finally able to exist independently again. And at the center of it all, a message was broadcasting on all frequencies in hundreds of languages. "Thank you for reminding us who we were." Captain Mitchell looked around his bridge at the stunned faces of his crew. They had come to Zalani space, hoping to learn how to fight the Harvesters. Instead, they had found a way to free their victims. The war against the Harvesters had just taken a very unexpected turn. 10 years had passed since the destruction of the Nexus construct at Zalan Prime. Captain Mitchell, now Admiral Mitchell, stood in the observation deck of the new Unity station orbiting Earth. Through the massive windows, he could see ships from dozens of different species coming and going in peaceful commerce. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. "Admiral," came a familiar voice behind him. "The council meeting is about to begin." Mitchell turned to see Dr. Elena Vasquez, now the Director of Interspecies Relations, approaching with a stack of data tablets. She had aged in the past decade, but her eyes still held the same curiosity and determination that had led them to make that fateful broadcast to the Harvesters. "How many species will be represented today?" Mitchell asked as they walked toward the council chambers. 47, Vasquez replied, including 3 civilizations that were thought to be completely extinct until the Nexus collapse restored their consciousness patterns to independent existence. Mitchell nodded. The restoration of absorbed civilizations had been one of the most remarkable consequences of their actions at Zalan Prime. When the Nexus construct destroyed itself, the consciousness patterns it had been storing didn't simply vanish. Instead, they found ways to rebuild themselves using the technology and resources of surviving species. The Zalani had been the first to benefit. When the energy patterns of their absorbed population integrated with the survivors, the Zalani collective had grown from 50,000 refugees to nearly 10 million restored minds inhabiting new synthetic bodies. Other species had followed. The Thorin, who had been extinct for over 1,000 years, now existed as energy beings who could interact with physical matter through specially designed interface systems. The Vec had chosen to rebuild themselves as a collective consciousness that spanned multiple star systems. "Any word from the exploration fleets?" Mitchell asked. 3 more dead systems have been restored to life," Vasquez reported. The Kethrin found surviving populations on worlds the Harvesters had supposedly sterilized decades ago. It turns out the Harvesters never actually killed everyone. They just moved the survivors to hidden processing facilities. Mitchell felt a familiar surge of satisfaction. Every rescued population was proof that their desperate gambit had been worth the risk. They entered the council chambers, where representatives from nearly 50 species were gathering. The chamber itself was a marvel of interspecies cooperation, designed to accommodate beings who breathed different atmospheres, operated at different temperatures, and communicated in dozens of different ways. Counselor Thren was there, of course. His Zalani collective now controlled 23 restored worlds and had become one of the most powerful trading organizations in the galaxy. Next to him sat Ambassador Corthex of the Thorin, his energy form contained within a crystalline framework that allowed him to interact with physical beings. But the most remarkable presence in the room was the Nexus Avatar, a single consciousness that spoke for all the minds that had been freed from Harvester control. It appeared as a shimmering hologram that constantly shifted between the appearances of different species. "The meeting will come to order," announced President Walsh. She had been re-elected twice since the Harvester crisis, and her leadership during the Reconstruction had made her one of the most respected figures in galactic politics. "We are here to discuss the final report on the Harvester remnant situation," she continued. "Admiral Mitchell, please brief us on the latest developments." Mitchell stood and activated the central display. A star map appeared showing the current state of the galaxy. Green areas indicated restored civilizations. Blue areas showed new colonies and trading partnerships. Red areas marked the few remaining Harvester strongholds. The Harvester network has been reduced to less than 5% of its former strength, Mitchell reported. Most of the remaining constructs are isolated units operating without central coordination. He highlighted several red areas on the map. These remaining Harvester forces have shown no interest in continuing their previous pattern of civilization absorption. Our intelligence suggests they are attempting to develop new protocols that can process chaotic cultural data without system. Failure. Ambassador Corthex's crystal form pulsed with blue light as he spoke. In other words, they are trying to learn how to absorb human-style civilizations without being destroyed by the contradictions. Correct, Mitchell confirmed, but our analysis indicates this will take them centuries to accomplish, if it's possible, at all. The Nexus avatar shifted to display a pattern of swirling lights. When it spoke, its voice contained harmonics from dozens of species. The absorbed consciousness patterns concur with this assessment. Harvester collective processing was optimized for logical, organized civilizations. Adapting to chaos-based cultures requires fundamental changes to their core programming. Counselor Thren leaned forward. Admiral, what about the new threats we've been detecting? Mitchell activated a new section of the display. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected signals from outside the galaxy. It appears that the Harvesters were not unique. There are other collective intelligences operating in nearby galaxies. A murmur of concern went through the chamber. The threat of new Harvester-type enemies was something everyone had feared. However, Mitchell continued, we now have advantages we didn't possess 10 years ago. We have a galactic alliance of nearly 50 species, each contributing unique technologies and perspectives. We have restored populations with thousands of years of experience fighting collective intelligences, and we have proven that even ancient, powerful enemies can be defeated with unconventional thinking. President Walsh stood up. Which brings us to the main purpose of today's meeting. We need to decide how the galaxy will respond to future threats. Dr. Vasquez activated her data tablet and began reading from prepared notes. The Integration Committee has completed its analysis of galactic defense capabilities. Our combined fleets now number over 10,000 ships, incorporating technology from dozens of civilizations. She looked around the chamber. But more importantly, we have developed new protocols for rapid response to distress calls. Any civilization that sends out a call for help will receive aid within 30 days, regardless of distance or danger. The Nexus avatar pulsed with warm colors. This represents a fundamental change in galactic culture. For thousands of years, civilizations survived by hiding from threats and avoiding contact with other species. The success against the Harvesters has proven that cooperation is more effective than isolation. Counselor Thren nodded agreement. The Zelani Collective formally proposes the establishment of permanent rapid response fleets stationed throughout the galaxy. These fleets would be funded and staffed by all member species. Seconded, said Ambassador Corthex. The vote was unanimous. Mitchell felt a surge of pride as he watched the galaxy's leaders commit to defending each other. This was what they had hoped to achieve when they first answered the Zelani distress. Call. There is one more item to discuss, President Walsh announced. Admiral Mitchell, please brief us on the memorial project. Mitchell activated the final section of his presentation. The display showed construction activities around a restored star system that had once been home to the Vex civilization. Construction of the memorial is proceeding on schedule, he reported. When completed, it will serve as both a monument to the civilizations destroyed by the Harvesters and a research center for studying collective intelligence threats. The memorial was perhaps the most ambitious project in galactic history. Representatives from every known civilization, living and restored, were contributing to a massive structure that would preserve the cultural heritage of extinct species while serving as a center for cooperation and learning. The inscription has been finalized, Dr. Vasquez added. It will read, "They heard us. They came. The darkness ended. The simple words carried enormous weight. They represented the transformation of a galaxy from one ruled by fear and isolation to one based on cooperation and mutual aid. As the meeting concluded and representatives began to leave, Mitchell found himself standing with Counselor Thren and the Nexus Avatar. "Admiral," Thren said, "I often wonder what would have happened if humanity had chosen not to answer our distress call." The Nexus Avatar shifted to display patterns reminiscent of human neural activity. Based on Harvester expansion patterns, they would have reached human space approximately 47 years after the destruction of the Zilani Collective. Humanity would have faced the same fate as the other isolated civilizations. Mitchell nodded. But humanity didn't face that fate. And neither did anyone else, because we chose to answer the call. He looked out through the chamber's windows at the busy spaceport beyond. Ships from dozens of species were loading and unloading cargo, passengers, and cultural exchanges. The galaxy had become a place of trade, cooperation, and friendship instead of fear and isolation. "You know what the best part is?" Mitchell said to his companions. "What?" Thren asked. "We're not done yet. There are still galaxies out there that might need help. And now we know that when someone calls for aid, the response can change everything." Dr. Vasquez joined them at the window. "The exploration fleets are already preparing for intergalactic missions. If there are civilizations in other galaxies facing threats like the Harvesters, they won't face them alone." Mitchell smiled as he watched a group of young beings from different species working together to load supplies onto an exploration ship. They were the first generation to grow up in a galaxy where cooperation was normal and isolation was unthinkable. "Admiral," the Nexus Avatar said, "the collective consciousness of the absorbed civilizations wishes to express gratitude once more. Your species chose to risk everything for strangers, and that choice saved not just the living, but the dead as well." "We didn't do it for gratitude," Mitchell replied. "We did it because it was the right thing to do." Thren placed one of his 4 hands on Mitchell's shoulder. "That is precisely why humanity was the species capable of changing everything." As Mitchell left Unity Station that day, he thought about the long journey that had brought them to this point. It had started with a simple decision. When someone calls for help, you answer. That decision had transformed a dying galaxy into a thriving community. It had restored extinct civilizations and created new forms of cooperation that no one had imagined possible. But most importantly, it had established a principle that would guide the galaxy for generations to come. No one faces the darkness alone. Somewhere, in the vast cosmos, other civilizations might be sending out their own desperate calls for help. And when those calls reached the stars, they would find that the galaxy had learned humanity's greatest lesson. When someone needs help, you answer the call. The memorial on Zilan Prime would soon bear witness to that truth, carved in stone and energy and the collective memory of 50 species. They heard us. They came. The darkness ended. And in the space between the stars, new signals were already being prepared. Not distress calls this time, but messages of hope and offers of friendship. From a galaxy that had learned the power of standing together. The darkness had ended. The light would spread to the stars.